and services, and the flows are more knowledge intensive. As a matter of fact, in terms of manufacturing now, you have more services, knowledge intensive service input than non-service input, so that not only is the world growing more service oriented, but in manufacturing itself, you have service knowledge intensive growth. Now, it has been said by the research coming out in by a number of studies that the competencies required for the knowledge-intensive economy include critical thinking, creativity and entrepreneurship, intrapersonal skills, which include self-motivation, self-direction, the ability to lead, and also interpersonal skills, meaning the ability to work with teams, etc., in addition to the core subjects and the ICT. Now, if that is the case, with the Caribbean already being, most of the countries being service-oriented economies, does that not require us to strategize in terms of how we develop these skills in order to make use of the trends that are developing? And in that context, I would like to know, as you worked with the CXC, where do you think we stand in terms of our curriculum? Is that in need of some revamping to adequately deal with the knowledge economy?
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I don't think we have the time
but he needs to respond.
Okay, perfect, yeah. So we open the floor again. I recognize a person in the nice resplendent blue. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
Are you wearing blue?
No,
I actually
sorry.
have a mic in my hand.
Can we start with this lady first, I reckon, if you don't mind?
What about...
Thank you. Can I just say, sitting here listening, to me, the kind of Caribbean I would like to see in 2050 is one where right relationships prevail. Right relationships in terms of mutual respect and self-respect. Mutual respect, if we respect each other, there won't be as much domestic violence, which is a major issue in our region. And self-respect, we would use modern technology effectively, not for the porn. I read a report that says in the Caribbean we're really high up in terms of the use of modern technology for pornography. And we know that in many of our countries, many students are using it inappropriately in the classroom for doing all sorts of things. So let's look at self-respect and mutual respect. And if we have mutual respect, our governments will respect the people they're there to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. The gentleman in the back?
Yes.
Straight down in the middle, yeah.
I have a mic in my hand.
Is that
All
me?
right.
Or?
Yeah, it is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. For much of today, I've heard a lot of ideology and ideological statements presented as fact. And it's often, especially when it comes to the role of the state. In much of the historical evidence of most countries that have successfully developed, the state has had a very primary role in allocating resources and directing resources in such a way that allows the private sector to actually innovate. I also heard just now that much of the corruption that happens within our island states seem to happen in the state sector. I'm wondering if there is any less corruption that happens in the private sector. Because I think sometimes when we seek to formulate solutions, we often formulate them based on ideological dispositions as opposed to actual evidence. And in terms of the corruption, most advanced countries now have had, in their very early days of capitalist development, have had very high levels of corruption. We're talking about Japan, the United States, Germany, etc. The same applies for productivity levels. Germans were considered the laziest people in their very early days after the Industrial Revolution. But oftentimes we don't hear those kinds of things. We hear that we need to imitate the Germans, or we need to imitate the Scandinavian countries and so on. But the evidence does not actually show that productivity levels were very high when they just started developing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, can I speak now?
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Lila Valère, and I'm a psychologist. So I wanted to bring a psychological perspective to what we've been doing here. And I think it is very important for us to look. We have been talking about the economy and the private sector and sustainability, and all of that is important. But what is equally important is to consider the psychological implications of convergence in the Caribbean. How would the people feel? Some people may be feeling fearful, and I was wondering what consideration and what thought has been given to looking at the psychological and sociological implications of this on the people. Remember, it's different islands. They all have different cultures. They have different ways of doing things. When they hear convergence, they may feel fearful. What are we going to do about that? And when you think of the word convergence being bringing together, it's like a marriage. And when you have a marriage, you have to consider, yes, we get together, there'll be unity and strength, but for a marriage to last, for it to have the depth, for it to have that profound difference in the whole lives of people. And for the Caribbean, it's much more complex. Then we have to look at the underlying factors. How are we going to build trust between these people? All these people that may have to give up some of their sovereignty. How are we going to foster respect for the differences in the people so that it can last?
Point very well made.
So what my point is, I have a proposal.
Okay.
Because it wasn't considered. I didn't hear it at all. But what I want to suggest, that you appoint a committee, so when this goes on and the exploration goes on, a committee of psychologists from all the islands and all the states to get together to look at the sociological and the psychological aspects of it, the implications, and what can be done to build that trust and caring and love and respect, so that when we build together, that's the passion that's going to keep it flowing. And we need to look at that and consider those things. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
And we have two questions via Twitter. The first is, how do we tackle the extreme high rate of youth unemployment in Barbados? And secondly, with the aim of private sector being pro-youth, where do they go to collaborate in policy and implementation? So we'll get one more question.
I have been holding this mic for a while.
I'm not even seeing.
Indira, Saju, and Ali down in the back.
Okay, I'm seeing you, Indira.
Thank you. I would like 2050 that we're not having a similar conversation to start with. That said, and assuming a values-based future, as many people have said, respect and less corruption and all of that, I want to see economies that are diversified, where the plantation model no longer obtains, but where our economies are diversified. They are based on adding value to the natural resources and the added resources that we can bring within a global value chain that ensures that those most vulnerable can eke out a very decent standard of living out of it. Whether we're talking about farmers, whether we're talking about young people, regardless of who. So the models have to ensure that it speaks to issues of sustainability and value adding, where we keep as much of the value within our shores rather than exporting it elsewhere. Secondly, I'd like an education system that is heavily reformed to what it is currently, because it is not producing the kinds of critical thinkers, the kind of happy and resourceful and self-driven individuals that we need to support development. And finally, political governance. I would like to see significant reform in our political governance system that allows for stronger voices to be given to the people and political leadership that puts country and region first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Indira. Now, I'm fulfilling my part of the contract, okay? So we need to give the panelists an opportunity to respond, and then we'll come back to you. You have my vote. Would that be reasonable? So, Marsha, perhaps you would like to respond with a few observations?
In terms of the last member's comment, one of the things that I think that we need to do is to accept responsibility at the individual level. We need to understand that we have control for ourselves and ourselves alone. And in doing that, we can therefore define where we want to go. And once that is done, collectively, we can move forward. We can no longer rely on leaders to be leaders. A leader has followers. They do not have to be silent. They do not have to be deaf. They do not have to be invisible. We have voices. And collectively, the Caribbean is essentially one of the most highly educated regions in the world. We need to utilize that. We need to bring it to a point where it benefits us. That is not happening at this point. And we need to begin to understand and ask ourselves these questions. Why are we not moving forward? Understanding that it is only going to be possible if we ask ourselves individually that question and then make that change. It's like the man in the mirror scenario. We have to move forward. And if I'm going to give a spin in terms of renewable energy, we need to be able to recognize that we have resources of our own. We have local resources. Instead of continually importing, I know that I'm sitting here speaking in an oil-producing country, but most of the Caribbean countries aren't. And we need to recognize that we have resources available to us, and readily so. And that they're at this point competitive with regular fossil fuel. And therefore, there's absolutely no excuse for seeking to go ahead and tap into those resources.
Thank you so much, Marsha. Yeah, please, go ahead.
The price of solar PV is about 16 cents per kilowatt hour as compared to the average price for fossil fuel generated electricity, which is about 37 to 40 US cents per kilowatt hour. The price for on land wind is considerably cheaper. It's around 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour. We need to begin to move. We need at the grassroots level to begin to ask these questions. We need, as in Barbados' case, for example, where within the last 4 years, there's been a renewable energy rider, and that has allowed the average individual, the average you and I, the average Joe, to be able to begin to democratize their energy systems, energy supply.
Thank you so much.
That needs to happen.
Thank you so much, Marsha. Eleanor, would you like to make an observation from the standpoint of young people of the region?
Let me just start by saying that I've sat here from yesterday into today, and one of my biggest disappointments is that while we are planning for a vision for 2050, it's a vision for youth. Because in 2050, a lot of the individuals here would have been eulogized